Well, hello, everybody. This is Paris Williams, CEO and co-founder of Next Level Financial. Welcome to our recorded webinar where we are going to talk about optimizing profitability like a CFO. You might have a CFO on your team. You might not have a CFO on your team, but these are some things that you need to know in order to make sure that you are moving forward in your business, considering the profitability. And our lead CFO, James, is going to be leading this webinar. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yes, great to meet you, or great to see you, or great to be seen, everyone. Looking forward to diving into this topic, very important, and looking forward to just jumping into it. So there we go. All right, so why does this matter? So we're talking about profitability, and we're looking at it through the lens of architects, engineers, and construction industry. And it is important right now, obviously, because profit is always important. But one thing that we're seeing out in the marketplace right now, and just got some statistics that came in a couple of days ago for AEC firms. 83% of those firms are reporting that there is revenue slowing. So revenue growth is slowing. We've enjoyed some time where we've had consistent growth, but now we're seeing that slow a little bit. And we, as we look throughout the year and the current economic environment, we see that that's probably going to continue to happen. There's going to be some slowing. So we want to be ready, right? And what is the best way to combat, that type of financial challenge? That's just having really good sound financial management to making sure that we've got, what we need and we can operate our firms efficiently and still be profitable. So that's what we're talking about here.
And we should mention that we are recording this in May 2025. So for folks that are thinking about, well, when is this happening? So that's all within that context.
Yep. So if we look at what we're going to cover today, so what's the state of the industry? We'll look at some benchmarks. We'll look at kind of how I see the world from a profitability standpoint, and what are some key levers that we can pull on in order to ensure that we are doing absolutely everything that we can in order to have a profitable firm. And then we'll look at some common pitfalls, and then we'll have some 30-day action points. But let's go ahead and jump right into it. All right, so looking at the big picture, the industry has some stats here as far as what's the average operating profit margin. We're seeing 18%. The second stat where you're looking at what firms are reporting that there are more and more cash flow challenges. And as we said, given the whole context of not only last year, but the environment that we're in this year in May 2025, cash flow is a thing. I'm seeing and hearing about projects are being either stalled, some delayed, some completely either abandoned. And all of that is weighing on our cash flow situation, right? So, which is why it's really important that we're having this conversation today. And then another benchmark, if you look at the top tier firms are really achieving really great profitability margins. Think about 25% is very healthy in a place where you want to be. So coming out of last year, these are some of the numbers that we're seeing. But as I said before, things are going to be changing a little bit, and we want to make sure that we're adaptable to that change. Yeah. So what are some of the common challenges here? So, for you all that are in the industry, this is probably no surprise, but we've got cost overruns, billing practices are a challenge, overhead is a challenge. We're going to dive into that much more. And then just like real-time visibility at the project level is something that can be a challenge if we don't have our systems in order and systems in check. So
Tell me a little bit about some of the things that you've seen as far as the challenges. I mean, I see these four here and they're big, but can you give us a little bit more detail about some of these challenges?
Yeah, so I give you an example of, for example, the inconsistent billing practices. So this is a challenge where there is not good systems that are in place. I can tell you about a company that I've worked with where we had um, payables that were, or we had our receivables and payable cycle that was far larger than what it should have been. So for the industry, the average is 70 days, days sales outstanding. But we had an issue where our outstanding payables were not necessarily a reflection of what was going on externally, but it was what was happening internally. And what was happening internally is we weren't organized. Everyone was on the same page. When milestones came up, we were not billing when it should have been billed like right away. And there wasn't a clear line of communication between us with the front level staff and the back office staff. And so we had long outstanding payables, mostly because of that. So what we did to fix it is we established a system where we started meeting on a weekly basis, and we were looking at the payable or the receivables with the other stakeholders. So we had the project managers included in that, and then another like head of operations included in that meeting, as well as people on the finance staff. And we would go through all of those receivables, and we would talk about what the status was.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, when it came time to bill, we had those same stakeholders at the table, and we would go through, we say, here's everyone who needs to be billed this month. Let's make sure that they're all billed. And so we had the teams coming together to ensure that the consistency of billing, and also we were always staying on top and always following up when we had issues. So what ended up happening was after about the course of a year, we were able to shave about 21 days off of that payment cycle, which is huge, right? Cash flow is huge. So, you know, that is a thing. The billing practices, it's almost sometimes it's like, you do the work and you think you're doing all the important stuff, but if you're not getting paid on the back end, then it's a problem. So we were able to really do some good work there. So that's what I mean by inconsistent billing practices being a challenge. And I just gave an example of how, really by keeping people on the same page and making sure that you're staying on top of what needs to be done.
That's amazing. I'm gonna be honest with you. When you mentioned that meeting once a week, I was thinking, oh my goodness, I do not want to be a part of that meeting. Like that's a lot of accountability and kind of being in the weeds, but you have to have a team that's in the weeds. So I was thinking, oh, who's in on that meeting? It's probably your accounting team and maybe your controller or CFO. But then when you got to the result of how it shaved 21 days off of the billing cycle, I thought, oh, well, that's worth it. I mean, that's a lot
That's
of time.
Yeah, yes, exactly. So it's super important,
Mhm.
and it's the day-to-day work that needs to be done to make sure that the business is financially sound, particularly when you're in a challenging environment.
Yeah.
So here's another thing. Um, so this is about like not confusing being busy and profitable. It's really easy to, you're running a firm and you're a project manager, and the work is coming in, you have work to do, and people are busy, people look busy, people are in meetings, people are doing this, that, you're like, okay, things are working, right? But that does not mean that you're profitable. And so really, you're not keeping your eye on the ball in terms of like what those actual numbers are, then you can be in a bad place. So if you look at this chart here is just a simplified chart, but it shows that the revenue growth. So this green line is the revenue growth over time. But you also then see the profitability growth. So there's two things I'll mention here. So one, my point about keeping your eye on the ball. Sometimes you get busy, you're really busy, you're not paying attention to things. And so profitability can suffer because the firm is so busy. But also, it is, it's a known fact that typically growth can put pressure on profitability because of the investments that you're making in people, there's some technology you need to put in some systems in place. And so that is definitely true. And we want to make sure that we have sound financial discipline so that we're consistently looking at what the impacts of the decisions that we're making so that we can properly sort of thread the needle in terms of making sure that things aren't too far out of whack and that we are growing and we're also growing profitably. So going on, turning the current corner here to how the CFO thinks. So of course, profit is important. I'll say this, and I'll probably say it more than once. So there was a saying, the finance person, I'm sure, I don't know who to attribute it to, but the saying goes, revenue is vanity and profit is sanity and cash is king. And so what does that mean? Revenue, you hear it, people say, I got this $5 million project. Everybody's like, wow, great, we won the project, we won the deal. That's awesome. To the finance person, to the CFO, that's great. And it's also vanity. What are we going to net off of that project, right? So looking at being able to even upfront put some numbers to what it's going to take to deliver that $5 million project, for example, right? How are we going to reach our target profit numbers, which I would say is 20% is a good benchmark. So what we're seeing in the industry, but 20% and north, are we going to be able to hit those numbers or not? So doing a little bit of forecasting in advance so that we know that we are aligning our resources with the opportunity. So making sure that's in place is key. So profitability is key. Top line is key, but we have to get the profit. We got to bring those dollars in. We have to make sure that cash flow is flowing.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I like that you wrote think like a CFO because for some of us, that's not going to be our immediate, thought is this profitable? It's just we won, let's go.
Mhm.
So I like that idea of, again, if you don't have a CFO, you have to really either get somebody on your team like that or get yourself in that mindset from the beginning.
Yeah, from the beginning, because you never know, you could be taking on a project that is a loser, right? If it requires so much of your people's time, other resources, and you're not modeling it out in the beginning. It could be one of those things that you just regret, and we don't want that. We don't want that
Yep.
at all. Okay, so this is a simplified profit formula. So revenue minus direct costs. So the cost it takes to deliver the service, your gross profit. So we want to focus more on gross profit rather than revenue. So revenue is great. We need it, absolutely. But gross profit is an important metric. And then, of course, the overall net profit, taking into consideration overhead, is a key metric as well. So as a CFO, we're focusing more on gross profit and net profit as opposed to just looking at the top line revenue number, which obviously we acknowledge is helpful, but the key metric is gross profit and net profit that we're looking at. All right, so let's look at these three things here. So here's a kind of framework way to kind of think about profitability. So one is maximizing project margins, right? So what does that mean? So we're talking about we're in this type of business, we're talking about people time, hours, and it's really that translates into utilization, right? So we want to make sure that that the utilization is where it needs to be from our people. And then also scope. You want to ensure that that we're paying attention to the scope and that scope creep is not throwing a wrench in our original projections. And we don't want to find that later at the end of the day. So we want to make sure that we're paying attention to that. So as a project goes, we're paying attention to utilization, we're paying attention to the scope, making sure we keep our eye on the ball there. Then we go into like right sizing overhead. So this is all about, mostly about labor, about people. So making sure that our, our people is right sized with the amount of revenue gross profit that we have. So we're not getting out of whack with having so much heavy overhead in the people that it becomes a problem. And then thirdly, we're talking about shortening the cash conversion cycle. So I talked a little bit about that earlier, gave us an example of that. But that is all about making sure that we have good collection policies, good processes there, to make sure that those dollars are consistently going to be coming in, because we need them. Okay, so just looking at this, we're talking about some levers that we're making sure that we're managing. So I talked about this a little bit before, but the gross margin. So we want to make sure that we're managing that gross margin. And so what does that mean? That means that we're paying attention to the project from beginning to end. Now, some of the things that I'm going to talk about here are going to be sort of intuitive and simplified. But the challenge is we don't always do them, or it's not always in our consciousness, right? So I'm just going to remind you of some of these good best practices, right? So tracking that project from start to finish. So what does that mean? Well, let me give you an example of a situation where that's not done, just to kind of help put some context around it. So we had a company that had a project going, and during the course of the project, customer wanted a change in the delivery, and so project manager approved it, made the change. There was not a process for making a change, but that change was then made. Project continued to go on. Once project was done, all the accounting came in and everything was sort of closed up. We saw that this project had a loss. It's like, why is this project had a loss? He said, oh, we had this situation where we needed to make this adjustment, and we had to do this. And so now we have an issue. And so there's multiple problems with this. One, the project wasn't being tracked consistently. There wasn't full visibility among the important stakeholders to understand what was going on. And then two, we didn't really have an opportunity to go back and to fix this until the end. And so many of you know, when you try to do something at the end, you try to go back, you try to get something for what you were probably supposed to be due. It's hard. And so what ended up happening, it ended up settling. So we didn't get all of what we were due because we didn't have any leverage. It was over. The project, it was done. We finished our work. And we got something in terms of like what that additional cost was to us, but we were not able to recoup it. And that ended up being a money loser. That project was a loss. And so, lesson learned is we need to be consistently on the same page with the important stakeholders. And when we do have changes, we have change control. We need to make sure that we're managing that and that any changes are getting approved, the budget is getting updated, and then, we understand, where we could be profitability wise. So this is what we're talking about with gross margin management. It's not a start it and then you see where you are when you're done. It's a start it and you manage it throughout your project consistently to ensure that profitability targets that we have, that those are going to be achieved.
That's good. That's good. And I love what you said at the very beginning. You said, these are things that we know, but we don't always do. Oh, we know we should be checking in, but we just check on it at the beginning and at the end. That's the beautiful thing about having a challenging economic system is I think more people will start to put these practices into play because they'll probably be wanting to think about gross margin more than maybe they did when money was just freely flowing and projects were just going and going, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And it's important to have, the team is important. So it's important to have people on the team that are able to facilitate this and bring the conversation together and making sure that these things are happening and you have the stakeholders. So the having a strong support in the team is important. So when we look at lever number two, controlling overhead. So this is the overhead costs. This is our people. I talked about this earlier. Utilization is key. When you look at from an industry standpoint, the utilization levels between 75 and 85% is probably where the call it healthy range, or that's what we're seeing as benchmarks. So having staff that is utilized to that extent is helpful. And tracking the overhead is important from the standpoint of particularly like when you have experienced times of growth or you get big projects. Sometimes you get a little ahead of yourself in terms of either how you're hiring or to some of the things that you're committing commitments to. So, so making sure that you're looking at your ratio. So I have this thing what I call the labor efficiency ratio. So that's where we're looking at our investment in people relative to what we're making in our profitability. And so those things, we have these target numbers where those things need to be in alignment. And when they come out of alignment, then it's sort of a warning signal to us to say, hey, let's take a step back. What's happening here? Do we need to make some adjustments? So looking at your numbers, your utilization number, your labor efficiency multiplier numbers, those are key. And also this last point here about systems is huge because it just the efficiency that you can get from investing in the right systems, be it an ERP or some other add-on system to help you with tracking resource management, for example, is super important. All right, so the third lever here is cash flow. So this is where I say cash is king, right? So we want cash to come in faster. And we've got some of the practices here. I mentioned earlier that we had the situation where once we started putting in really good practices, and we created a flow there, we started collecting much sooner and shaving those days off of our receivables. So this is something that it just takes day-to-day consistency, making sure that we're actively managing to get the cash in ASAP, right? Because cash is king. And in this business where you have long cycle times, like 60, 70 days to get paid, it's critical that we're able to turn cash in as soon as possible. And also just, sometimes, you can't, there's unforeseen factors that happen and there'd be cash gaps. So as a side kind of thing here is making sure that you have that line of credit available and make sure that you're managing that. Sometimes there's a situation where line credit was going to expire and you have to go back and scramble to get that reopened. So making sure that that line of credit is available. If you don't have one, get it, talk to your bank. But also making sure that you've got what you need if you need to tap on it in order to manage these cash flow gaps. Okay. All right, so on the common profit pitfall, so I talked about this a little bit earlier, but if you look at that first one, overhiring during revenue spikes. So, and kind of like you got a big project, and I've seen it where you've got more work coming in, and you want to hire more people in order to handle the work. But we have to be careful of that. Scope creep, I talked about that as well. um, Scope creep without increasing a fee. We've got to get that under control, and then allowing WIP and AR to drag down cash reserves. So those are some things there that that really are common that end up happening to firms in the industry.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm going to ask again, these are the pitfalls. Can you share any example of where you've seen this and how folks have fixed it?
Yeah, so for example, I have a couple examples, but I'll just go into one. With the overhiring, for example, uh, so, um, so I had a company where there was an increase in contracts, and project work, going on. And so there was a push in the organization to hire more people. And, um, and the challenge is if those contracts, some of those contracts, they end at some point, right? And so we need to be aware of, if we're going to bring on more staff, how that affects things on the back end. So in this situation, there was a push to hire some people. Um, Actually, they gave the green light to hire some just based on the forecast that I was doing. So I did a forecast where I was looking out 6 to 12 months, and looking at how what the impact is of bringing on this additional person with the new increased revenue level. And so I green lighted it. But I did say, um, and there was more that was wanted, that we can't hire anyone else, um, at this current level that we are right now, just based on, the overhead size, and then based on what we have in revenue, it's not gonna be wise for us to do this. So unless it's a really good strategic reason, um, we should not be doing that. And so it's hard because, if you see opportunity and you want to invest in advance, and that makes sense. But we also have to just balance that. There's a sort of healthy tension that we have to have there. So what I did is, and what I'm suggesting is, if we do have a spike, we do get some new large contracts that come on. We forecast it out, like we do a forecast 6 to 12 months, because of projects, last, sometimes that long, sometimes longer, and look at what that new additional revenue is going to be with the new contract. And then and then add in your model, the additional people, additional time. And then after that project ends, model the scenario where if you don't replace that revenue, what does that do to the financial position of the business? Right. And then ask the question, it's like, okay, this project is going to end. Is it feasible, is it reasonable that we're going to be able to replace it, or not? So it's not a yes or no, right away, but it's that we have to weigh these different scenarios. So it's just important to not just kind of like knee-jerk reaction, bring in more people, but let's look at it in context. Let's run our numbers and see what our numbers tell us, because we may be able to do something alternative. We can hire contractors, we can do some other things that can help us to fill the gap.
Yeah, I love that within the context of thinking like a CFO, because it's very much like, yeah, there's a short term, but also the long term of like what happens when that project ends. So that's good.
Yeah, I mean, I have that companies where there were large projects, $1 million projects that were in place in one year, and then they had to then replace those projects the next year, and weren't able to do it. In some cases, they thought they would be able to do it, but some of those other projects got delayed. So it's just like you just, you never know. You have to weigh all that out. But that also goes to cash reserves too, where we need to make sure that we have appropriate cash reserves so that if there is these drops, these gaps, that we have some cushion there in that line of credit.
Yeah.
I think I talked about this one already, but this was where we updated our collection process. And, it took 21 days, and that's real money. That is real money that it took off. It took a year to do because these things take time. That's one of the things that we just know in business, things take time, these processes, but we did achieve this result, which was a great thing.
Yeah, that is fantastic.
All right, so here's some action points, some things that you can take away with you. Audit your project financial performance weekly. Even if it's not weekly, it's consistent. So you remember my example about the company where some change orders were approved, but there wasn't a process of where we estimated how much we should be billing additional and with those change orders. So the weekly audits will help that. Review your overhead expenses line by line. So just making sure that we're on the ball in terms of what is being charged. I mean, sometimes even technology and subscriptions, things that you're not even using, like it was a great thing at some point, and then not no one's ever not using it. So even things like that are things that we want to look at. Billing and collection process. So remember my example about us having long dated receivables, mostly because of our fault, because we didn't put the practices in place. But then once we fixed it, we were able to really collect a lot sooner and bring that cash flow in. So making sure that there's a process and policies there. And I'll say one other thing about that is sometimes like I've seen where there's one person that is doing primary collections, but if you hire someone else to help, because sometimes the work just gets to be a lot. When you've got 50, 60, 70, 100 projects, by having policies and processes, the people that are working on these things are working on the same page, because I've seen it where people are doing different things to collect, and that throws the whole thing off as well. So put in a policy, put in a process, get paid faster. All right, so I'm projecting myself into your own thinking here. I'm thinking like, this is what you should be thinking, or this is what you should ask, right? So ask yourself, ask your team, are we forecasting project profits monthly? So even where we are, what are our forecasts going forward for this particular project? So we're tracking what is, we're also projecting out to what potentially can be. That gives us insight. Are we building at every contract milestone? So staying on the ball, making sure that all the stakeholders are around the table or around the Zoom or connected through technology, and making sure that as soon as we hit that milestone, boom, there's a message that goes to say, okay, it's time to bill. So then we bill to make sure that cash is coming in. Are we tracking staff utilization rates? Right, so we want to have somewhere between a 75 and 85% utilized staff being utilized. And that helps us to obviously be profitable and also manage our workforce. How fast are we turning work into cash? So, it's all about like the cycle has to move and to run quickly. And then lastly here are our overhead expenses aligned with our revenue trends. So making sure that we're right sized, and also making sure that we're doing projections, consistent projections, in order to foresee if there are any challenges or issues around the corner. So
That's
these are
good.
good to ask yourself and good to ask your team to make sure that we're staying on the ball. All right, so I'm just gonna wrap it up here. So really, these were the three primary categories that we talked about, project margins at the project level. So making sure that we're looking at the project level, and tracking there from start to finish. Controlling overhead, so making sure that our people investment is aligned with our profitability. So there's some ratios that we can use in order to make sure that that is right. And then turning work into cash faster, right? So just go back to my saying there, profit, no, go back. Revenue is vanity, right? Profit, sanity, and then cash is king. So in that order, so cash being the most important. So if we're doing these things and we're just actively managing, we have that is a great financial management system within the business. And we want to make sure that you have what you need in order to be great at what you're doing.
Good stuff. Well, that's the end. Thank you for joining us, everybody. We would love to stay connected with you. If you would like to get a call and just get to know us a little bit more, you can go to our website to find our calendar and get a meeting. Also, with this webinar, this is something we haven't done before. James created a profitability checklist. So if you are on the list to receive this recording, you will also get that checklist because let's be real, some of us don't think like a CFO. And you need to have that checklist to know what should I be thinking about. And I think one thing you didn't talk about, James, that I hear you talk about all the time is like there's the projects and then there's also the whole enterprise. So it's just, I think the questions will really help them, yes, to think on the project level, but also to think about the whole company. So thank you for creating that. We will send out that profitability checklist along with this webinar recording. Thank you so much for watching.
Thank you.